This is Healthcare Uprising. We are here to shine a light on the innovators implementing positive change in American healthcare and the patient experience stories, good and bad, that can help others navigate the sometimes overwhelmingly complex American healthcare system. Welcome to the Uprising. We are not doctors and we don't play one on TV. If you need medical advice, consult with your physician or a healthcare professional. All right. Hello, health heads. Welcome and thank you for checking into this dose of the Healthcare Uprising. I'm your producer in the back, Jeremy Carr, here with your host in the front row, Heather Pierce. So what's on the agenda for today, Heather?
In today's episode, we're speaking with Jessica Tracy. She's the head of growth and partnerships with Enthea, a company that offers employers an innovative way to support employee mental health with cutting-edge evidence-based therapies like ketamine-assisted therapy and stellate ganglion block.
Stellate ganglion block. I don't know what that is, but it sounds uncomfortable.
Sure does.
Yeah.
Well, Jessica's passion is on increasing awareness and access to psychedelic-assisted therapies and mindfulness tools. She's also the CEO and founder of the Sage Collective, whose purpose is to integrate psychedelic-assisted therapy into the current health ecosystem so that more patients can have access to safe and affordable care. Finally, Jessica is a member of the Ketamine Task Force, whose objective is to increase insurance coverage and FDA approval for those therapies through clinical research. She brings over 20 years of experience and a wealth of knowledge to understanding the impact and value of ketamine therapy. And I could not be more excited to talk to her today.
If it's going to increase the things that insurance covers, I'm excited about it myself. So let's get into it here. Here's our interview with Jessica Tracy from Enthea.
Hi, Jessica. Thanks for joining us today with Healthcare Uprising. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So let's just get right into it. And if you could just give us a little bit of information, background, experience, what brought you to Enthea and what really inspired you to work with Enthea.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, from my perspective and my humble opinion, Enthea was doing some really incredible work. And I found them a few years ago, and I was just so inspired around the mission to create access to psychedelic assisted therapies. It was something that had been that I had worked with for my own mental health, and these therapies have been so transformative for me. And my background is in healthcare. I spent about 20 years in healthcare, and most of that in the employee benefits world. So I started out as an underwriter at Blue Cross. I went into the benefits consulting world for about a decade. So it was, kind of very much in the weeds and claims data, and then also putting together cost containment and health and productivity strategies. And then I spent some time in the clinical genetics space, also working with employers and unions and payers, and really learned firsthand. I shouldn't say firsthand. I learned firsthand the inefficiencies of other types of treatments like SSRIs from my own experience, but also learning through my work in pharmacogenomics that individuals that take or that try SSRIs for the first time, about 50% will not work. 50% of those medications will not work just purely based on your DNA and how you metabolize that medication. So a lot of this was just kind of coming to my own view and in my own experience. And I had just had, like I said, really transformative experiences with psychedelic assisted therapy. So when I learned that Enthea was creating that access and doing that by bringing it to employers, bringing it to unions where, health is really managed, I just thought that was really brilliant as a means to, one, educate individuals that may not be necessarily familiar with these healing modalities, how they work. I know there's a lot of stigma that, tends to come with them. And, in my opinion, a lot of misinformation that's out there. So the opportunity to be able to educate, about the value of these medicines, how they work, how they're unique and different than other traditional therapies. And then not only being able to educate, but also to really create that access for individuals. I just thought it was a really incredible opportunity. So I had it was kind of just a few different I think avenues of this all coming together. I had found them, I had talked to a number of people through networking, and they all kind of said, you have to work with Enthea. So it just kind of came together, and here I am now and doing this work, and really grateful to be able to do so.
Yeah, I love your story that you've had such a varied background. And so you've been able to kind of experience a lot of different parts of this, being in the broker space, the pharma, I'm going to mess this up, pharmacogenomics,
Pharmacogenomics.
and I want you to talk about that a little bit more because I'm not real familiar with that space. So maybe you can expand on that. But you seem to be coming at this I don't want to call it a problem, but it is, mental health conditions, psychiatric challenges, things of that nature. You're coming at it from a few different perspectives. So, what a 360-degree view it seems. So, that
Yeah.
certainly qualifies you to be working in this space. So, that's real exciting.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, how you bring that to light, because yes, I had the background in, working with employers, and of course looking at claims data and seeing all of the challenges with mental health that, was coming through in the claims data and the experience of the employer, and also recognizing that, hey, we don't have like a ton of solutions that are really I would say focus on like the root cause. A lot of the different approaches that we have today are really around, hey, here's some medication to, not feel those symptoms anymore, or here's some therapy and hopefully we can, talk through it. But the reality of it is, it's hard to kind of get into some of that deeply rooted stuff, some of those kind of micro and macro traumas, because they can be painful. So it's kind of hard to kind of get deep with traditional approaches. So I think because of that, some of the traditional approaches that employers are covering today, they're not something that I think can really get to the root cause, which is where the real healing and transformation and breakthroughs happen. And I kind of speak to it obviously from that angle of just understanding some of the employer's challenges and some of the gaps that they may have in their own mental health strategy. But, I'll share with you that I've also had my own personal experience in going through traditional approaches and going through, psychedelic assisted therapies. So I had always, in most of my adult and teenage life, I had struggled like pretty hard with anxiety. And it morphed into like a bunch of different things, when you're not managing it well. And if you're suppressing emotions, which I was doing at the time through medication, it can morph into other things. So it had morphed into, OCD at times, where I was kind of like over checking, kind of perfectionism was really coming through. It had turned into ADD just because my thoughts were all over the place. And I had so much like, angst, anxiety, energy that I didn't really know what to do with. And it turned into insomnia because of all the thoughts. And it had also turned into panic disorder, where I was getting panic attacks because my body was telling me, hey, Jessica, like you need to focus on this. You need to work through these traumas and kind of general stressors. You need to make some changes in your life, and you're still not doing it. So that's your body's way of saying, hey, alert, alert, you need to do something. And what did I do? I went to my doctor. My doctor gave me medicine and I numbed it all down. So here's my SSRI, so I don't have to feel this everyday sense of anxiety. Here's some Xanax, so when you get those alerts, you can turn it off. Use it for sleep. I used it for sleep too, because that's really the only thing that could kind of quiet the mind. And, I also dealt with it in other ways. I just worked myself to the bone, and that, had its own adverse effects. And I also drank too much. I think at the time I was like, oh, I'm just socializing. I'm networking all the time. This is great for my business. But if I look back at it now, I can see I was absolutely using it as a coping mechanism. And I didn't think it was an issue, because it's like, oh, it's just a glass of wine here, glass of wine, maybe two glasses there. But it adds up, and I was doing it fairly consistently. So in conjunction with that and the medicine, I was starting to get some adverse side effects, like word amnesia, forgetful. And, nobody really knew this on the outside. I was working my butt off. So I was like working my way up the corporate ladder, and I was always out doing something. So people thought everything was fine. And I was happy, but I was at the same time, I was also struggling with anxiety, when it would kind of rear its ugly face. So I share that with you because yeah, I definitely am coming at this with my own personal experience as well as just kind of understanding some of the challenges that the employer has. And just to close the loop, what psychedelic assisted therapy has really done for me was it helped me to not suppress those emotions, not just say, be quiet, I'm not going to listen to you today. I need to go do my thing. It was, hey, here are some of the things that are really causing those symptoms, that angst, that anxiety. And, here's kind of what you can do with it. So in combination of the medicine helping to kind of bring to light what needed to be worked through, and that in combination with therapy to kind of give me the resources and tools to then do something tangible with it, actionable, so I can really help to kind of move it through. And then just in general, the way psychedelics works, it does help to kind of reset the nervous system, to move suppressed emotions through. And then it fosters neuroplasticity. So that kind of maintains all of those beautiful outcomes. So, in working with these medicines, I was able to, kind of move through some of the sludge that was really holding me down and holding me back. And through that, I was able to get off all my medication. So I haven't been on any medication for over 4 years, and I haven't drank for over 2 years now too. So, and it's been really the best I've ever felt. My anxiety is like totally managed. I deal with it every now and then, but that's situational and that's normal. It's here to help us. It's just when it's on there every single day and like alert, 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 you have to recognize like something's going on, and you have to, take a look inwards and see what's happening there.
One of the things that's really exciting in, with this podcast and all the people that I get to meet, especially with these healthcare startups, right? Like startups like Enthea, and the people that work there, like Sherry, who has started the company, have these personal connections and these personal stories that inspire them to work in a particular company because they've had a personal experience. So I love that so much of the good work that's happening with companies like yours, and everything that you're doing. There's just like these personal, kind of driven uh, you know, stories behind them. So it's not just, I'm out here, pushing some, business idea or product because, it's good for other people. It's good for me, right? And I benefited from it. And so it's really, really neat to hear your background and your story, and kind of how all this came to be. Do you feel like it's like worlds collide and you're just in the right place, right time?
Yeah, it's so interesting because, I got into insurance and I spent about a decade in insurance. And then I was like, what am I doing here? I kind of got to a point where I just felt like I needed to do something different. I needed to kind of like contribute in a different way. And, and I kind of looked at it like, well, I made a ton of really amazing connections, learned a lot, helped some other businesses. But now looking back, it really makes sense, why I need to spend so much time in that space, because now I can kind of leverage that knowledge in this world and kind of, like you said, merge the two worlds together. And I think really help to, try to reshape the future. And when I say that, I mean like reshaping the future of like medicine and what we have access to, and, what employees have access to. We know that, the employers are really the ones that help shape health and medicine, and what's available and what's not, what's affordable and what's not. I mean, it's in the control of the employers and the unions. It's in their hands. So I find that like beautiful at the same time that there's so many people out there that do have the opportunity to like help make this change, help like create this paradigm shift that needs to happen, to really just like bring awareness to new ways. And like, look, this isn't for everybody. I'm never out here saying like, oh my God, everybody needs to do psychedelics. It's not the case, right? But there are people that like, that this is the medicine that's going to heal them. It's like when you've tried everything else and it's still not working and you're stuck, and, and like, it's not right for you, then like, why not explore other ways? And there's been so much science, so much research that has been done on these medicines to show how safe they are, how effective they are. And, I think we've built these containers now to really develop the appropriate safeguards to ensure that if someone is to access these medicines, that they're done in such a safe, like nurturing way. And that's like everything that Enthea is about. We're not out here saying like, hey, everybody needs to have this. We are out there to educate that this is available, this is out there. It is safe, it is effective, for certain people. Of course, there's exclusionary criteria, and that's all part of the careful screening process that someone has to go through. But our whole mission is to create safe access, right? To make sure that if people do access this, they know what they're getting, they know what they're working with, they're in the hands of trusted, credentialed providers that are trained and specialized in this, that, we're kind of helping guide people in like, well, how often should this be available? What is the appropriate treatment protocol? Short term, ideally, it's not something that we want people to just kind of keep doing. When you think about like ketamine assisted therapy, for example, you don't want somebody on ketamine for the rest of their life. It's really focused on making sure that everything we're doing is aligned with the clinical research to make sure that it's within kind of the safest protocols and the safest, most, I would say, evidence-based way of accessing these medicines. And I think, when we think about employers, that's really important, because they want to make sure that if they're going to create access to something like this, that it's done with like the utmost level of care. And that's how I view our role in this.
I have a layman's question for you, which is kind of my role here. So I just learned, so ketamine is a psychedelic? It's actually classified as a psychedelic?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and I think this is what may help with adoption from employers. So ketamine is not actually a psychedelic. It's an anesthetic. Okay. But it's coupled or bucketed. It's often bucketed into psychedelic medicine because it has a lot of there's some similarities in a number of ways. So there's similarities in that, when you receive the medicine, it's used to enhance the effectiveness and outcomes of psychotherapy in the way that we deliver this. So our clinicians, after careful screening, the clinicians give the individual a small dose of ketamine. They go through their experience, their journey, and then they speak with a therapist to talk about their experience. So it's similar to, mushrooms or maybe some other psychedelics, like traditional psychedelics, because within that window that you are, let's say, under the medicine, you're in the care of a doctor, you're monitored by the doctor. You are having an experience, and through that experience you may have certain visual aspects. So maybe you may see a past trauma that kind of becomes surfaced, but because it's a dissociative anesthetic, it helps you to kind of be the observer of that experience and look at it from an observer's perspective. And oftentimes when we do that, it's almost like a parent talking to a child, or a friend, talking to a friend, helping them get through something. You're able to look at it in a different light and kind of see, oh, that's not me. It's something that had happened, and kind of create this, I would say, way to almost like process it and move it through, and also get the awareness of what you need to do to be able to process that and move it through. So there is of course some comparisons in that respect. So the fact that you are going to be under the medicine for, let's say, 40 minutes or so, and having some of these experiences during that time. It also it does foster neuroplasticity. So that's another comparative to other psychedelics, where neuroplasticity is a big factor of why these medicines are so beneficial in the long term, because they're actually helping to kind of rewire, if you will, or reset the brain to a healthier state. So when we have these micro and macro traumas, when we take on certain beliefs, a lot of this kind of gets stored in our default mode network. So we have these ruminating habitual thoughts, these patterns of thoughts that run through our head. So, I'm not good enough, depressed based thoughts, fear based thoughts, and they get stuck and caught in this loop, almost like if you're a computer system, something that kind of just gets rewired over and over again. So the medicine helps to kind of go in there and reset the ruminating, the default mode network, and kind of stop or disrupt those patterns that have been going on for so long. And then it helps to create new neural pathways so that you can now have healthier, more positive brain connections to facilitate that broader sense of awareness, that broader perspective. So now you can see outside of this kind of smaller window that we can get stuck in when we have depression or anxiety. And I know that from personal experience, when you have anxiety and you go into an anxious state, it's almost like you're kind of like sucked down into this space, and you kind of forget what it feels like out here. But when you can broaden that perspective and broaden that awareness again, whether it be through the medicine or something else, you kind of are brought back to the person that you truly are without the anxiety. It's like you become more expansive, have a broader perspective, and can see things clearer, as they actually are, rather than like how the thoughts are kind of like forcing you to view and think and feel of them, if that makes sense. So there's absolutely some comparisons, yes, but it's truly an anesthetic.
But it's like it gives you the ability to look at your own self and your own problems objectively, as though they didn't actually belong to you, so you can see them clearly.
Exactly.
Wow.
That is very in line with, what you hear about the microdosing of psilocybin and things like that. So I see why it does get put in the same bucket. And one other follow-up question. You said that the traditional drugs, the pharmaceutical style drugs that they use for this, only have about a 50% success rate. What kind of success rate? I mean, is this a universal thing? Will this work for everybody, or is this, kind of like, do they have stats on how effective this really is, or is this really anyone who has that kind of problem can benefit from it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the stat that I mentioned around the inefficiencies of SSRIs, that was around how you metabolize medication. So 50% of the people will fail their SSRI, the first SSRI, purely based on how they metabolize the medication. And that's a statistic that I learned when I was in pharmacogenomics. There's other statistics out there. I think there's one statistic that says that antidepressants are only truly effective for like 15% of the population, or 15% of the time. But then 58% of the time you're having moderate to severe side effects from them. So lots of different stats out there that kind of speak to some of the challenges or limitations with mental health medications. And again, it's not to say that traditional mental health medications are bad, because, I know plenty of people that have used them and they've been really effective for getting them through some challenging times. And some people, based on whatever condition they have, they're really effective for helping them with that condition. So, anything that I say is not to say like they're all bad. What I'm saying is that we need to look at these other alternative ways for those that want a different way, that need a different way, because the traditional approaches aren't working. And to your question, I don't have a ton of stats offhand on the treatment resistance around these medications. What I do know is that I think the vast majority of people that do decide to work with these medicines after going through the screening process, they have been effective. There are, of course, exclusionary criteria. So certain individuals may not be eligible to work with the medicines based on prior history of certain mental health conditions, or based on, certain blood pressure levels, or uncontrolled heart conditions that they may have. But for the most part, what we're seeing is that they are highly effective. And if you look at some of the data too, that's out there for these different medicines, you'll also see a really high efficacy rate. So, when we think about, I'll just name a few. So ketamine for alcohol use disorder, 86% had experienced abstinence from alcohol at 3-month follow-up. PTSD, 86% that screened positive for PTSD at baseline screened negative at 12 weeks follow-up after their ketamine-assisted therapy treatment. For psilocybin, there's some really beautiful data around psilocybin for its efficacy for alcohol use disorder. And I want to say it was like half of the people in the study actually stopped drinking. And a significant amount, I think it was about 83% of heavy drinkers reduced their drinking after working with psilocybin. And of course, it's also been shown to be highly effective for anxiety, for depression, and for a ton of other conditions. So yeah, I definitely encourage going out there and exploring the research and the clinical evidence, because it's quite profound how many people it is actually helping for such a vast majority of conditions.
Yeah, those are some insanely high efficacy rates. I mean, you don't hear percentages like that with a lot of things.
Yeah, 85%. That's impressive. That's
Wow.
impressive.
Um, so we've been talking a lot so far about, ketamine therapy, and kind of its role in healthcare, in supporting folks with, mental health or, psychiatric issues. But I want to talk a little bit more about Anthea and your role, your company's role in kind of connecting the dots and being a connector of ketamine clinics, ketamine providers, the patients, the employers, and a little bit about that. So this has been a really great setup. So I think that people kind of understand first and foremost what ketamine is, and how it should be leveraged and used to treat people. But with the work that you're all doing in this space, well, actually, first question, is there anybody else doing anything like this? I mean, certainly not in my own research, but I could have missed something.
Yeah, there's so we've been around the longest,
Mhm.
have the only national network of credential providers and live customers and 2 years of data on outcomes. But there are two other companies that were established fairly recently that are out there doing the same thing as well. And again, like in our eyes, it's good, right? The more of us out there kind of fighting the good fight and bringing this out there, educating. There's so many people out there to educate. So we're all kind of out there educating and trying to bring awareness to this, and I think trying to do this in the best way possible.
Yeah, and I think too, you create a little bit of competition, but it also helps to normalize. I think that this is something that people want, right? It's something that they need, and it's something that works. So when you have others that are investing into it, and going to these employers or these unions, and we'll talk a little bit about that too, kind of your ideal client and who this really serves, probably more than anybody. It creates that normalcy and that kind of adoption of it, I think, in a more broader way. So that's good to hear. And in terms of what your company does, let's talk a little bit about, if you can kind of share, obviously your role with Anthea is head of sales. Certainly you're talking to lots of different people about, hey, this is a benefit that your employees and your people want and need. Can you talk a little bit about that work that you do, the kind of conversations you have, and maybe even to some point, like what is the hardest part of those conversations, like getting them over the hump to become a believer and say, yeah, this is something we want to invest into for our employees because, it's going to help them be better, more productive, healthier, happier people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So to your point, yeah, I head up growth and partnerships, and like I view myself as an educator. That's kind of how I view myself in this role. I know it's kind of a journey that we're in for the long haul. And we of course are up against, just kind of lack of awareness, lack of information, and some misinformation that has been out there. So right now, I think really my objective is to just educate as many people as possible. And I believe those that know that this is right for them and their company, they'll know that it's, they'll find the ability to move forward with us. And I view our role really as Enthea as a way to provide the appropriate kind of guardrails and around creating access, right? So when we think about what we provide, so Enthea ultimately gives employers, unions, EAPs the mechanism to provide to cover all or a portion of legal psychedelic assisted therapies to their employees and their members. So what that includes right now is ketamine assisted therapy. And to the earlier point, ketamine is not necessarily a psychedelic. It gets lumped into that category. So this is something that, absolutely is legal in all 50 states. It's, there are clinics across the country. You can probably find one on most corners in major cities that are providing these services to patients. But right now, it's very much a kind of it's pay out of pocket. So it's kind of the haves and have nots that can really, I think, access these medicines right now. So uh, we're really helping to bring this to employers so that they can create that access for their employees. Now, we talk about, what's some of the challenges that we face. I think there's still, like I said, some stigma that we're up against, but the reality of it is ketamine is already here and it's already covered by most plans. And I don't mean just the traditional anesthetic. So, of course, the generic ketamine, which we use, generic is very inexpensive and it has a very high efficacy rate. So that's why we use the generic version of ketamine in conjunction with therapy in our treatment protocols. But over 2019, Johnson & Johnson came out with a brand name ketamine for the treatment of mental health. I think they saw the 25 years of research that has been done showing its safety, its efficacy for the use and treatment on mental health, and said, okay, there's something here, right? It's obviously helping a ton of people. It's highly effective. It's probably the fastest acting depression medication out there right now. But they also knew that, okay, well, it's a generic drug and it's already approved as an anesthetic by the FDA and covered in such a way. So, it's not necessarily something that, the pharma company is going to go through and say, hey, I'm going to go and get these other indications covered because it's going to cost them millions of dollars and it's about $2 a dose and just doesn't make sense. Now, prescribers, doctors can prescribe generic ketamine off label for other indications. So they can prescribe generic ketamine for the treatment of mental health if it's medically necessary. So that's how our clinicians are creating that access right now. They're bringing the patients through a very careful and very rigorous screening process to make sure, is it safe for them? Is it right for them? Is it appropriate for them? Do they have a condition that we're treating? And if so, that's through all the traditional mental health screening questionnaires. And if they line up on that, they also have to write a clinical narrative, again, explaining why it's medically necessary for this patient. So this is not something like it's a free for all and everyone's getting it. It's a very careful screening process to make sure that only the right individuals that absolutely need it are getting it. Then that comes to us. We do our prior authorization process as well. Again, like another level of clinical oversight to ensure it's appropriate and effective. And then we have them move forward through a treatment. So bringing it back to what's covered right now, we have this, generic medication that we're using, and we're using that because our doctors are using that because the clinical research says it's highly effective and it's actually 3 times more clinically superior to the brand name drug that's now available. So going back to what I was saying earlier, Johnson & Johnson, I think they saw the 25 years of clinical research on generic ketamine and said, okay, well, how can we now take this and, I think with good intent, make it more accessible? It has to be covered by insurance to be more accessible. Well, to be covered by insurance, it probably, in most cases, it should be FDA approved for that indication. So they took generic ketamine, which has 2 molecules, the R and the S molecule. They took the S molecule, brought it through the FDA approval process, and got it approved for the treatment of treatment-resistant depression and major depressive disorder with suicidality. So now we have an FDA-approved ketamine that is covered by most insurance plans. Challenges. It comes with a major price tag. So because it's a brand name drug and they have to make up their money, it's $600 to $900 a dose. It's a lot, very expensive. It's a nasal spray. Therapy is not required as part of the process. Maybe the individual has a therapist, maybe they don't, but it's not required. To me, that therapy is the most important part because that's where the individual is saying, I'm having the breakthroughs. I'm healing, not the medicine is healing me, right? Because if you're just going and getting the medicine and you're getting that on a regular basis, you feel better. And then you feel like, oh, I need the medicine again, right? So this medicine, the brand name, is shorter acting. It's 3 times less superior based on a study that was done comparing IV ketamine to this brand name ketamine, and there's no therapy included. And it's an open-ended treatment window. So an individual may say, okay, well, this is great. It's covered by my insurance. They'll get it. But like I said, because doesn't have therapy and it's a bit shorter acting, then they start to think, oh, well, the medication is what's making me feel better. So I need that medication. And then they may keep going back to getting it. That could cost the employer up to $45,000 a year if they do so. So I share that with you because ketamine is already here and it's already covered by the plan and it's already proven safe and effective by the plan for the treatment of mental health. What we're saying is that's great that you're creating that access. It's necessary. And from an affordability standpoint, insurance for most people is the only way they're going to be able to access it. But what we believe is that this should be short term. We believe in the power of therapy. So we're using generic ketamine, the original ketamine that's been around for 50 years. In most cases, it's used in pediatric anesthesia just to speak to the safety profile of this medicine. And we're using it in a very small dose, or our clinicians, I should say, are using it in a very small dose to enhance the effectiveness and outcomes of therapy. So really where the real magic is in the therapy and the integration, because that's where it gives the power to the individual and helps them to realize I'm doing the healing, I'm transforming here. The medicine is helping me because it's bringing to awareness and maybe kind of opening up my perspective, but they're doing the deep work in the therapy. And that's where the transformation happens. So our protocols align with the clinical research that is showing that these improvements are happening over, a short period of time. So 6 sessions is the set of is what we approve as part of our package that individuals can access. So that's short-term medicine, right? 6 sessions of the medicine and up to 8 therapy and integration sessions. So really what I'm saying here is that what we bring to employers is the ability to offer the safest approach that's aligned with clinical research, that is also the most cost-effective approach, and an approach that I believe puts more power into the individual or the employee in having that transformation versus them feeling potentially reliant on a medication.
So after just half a dozen or so treatments, it's like a permanent effect. It's a long-term effect from that.
So, I never want to say, cure or anything like that. I think that's, always have to be careful of that. But what I am saying is that they are doing really deep work. They are having, I'll share a testimony from a patient. They said that they felt as though it was like 10 years of therapy in just a few sessions. So because you're able to kind of fast track the information that you need to kind of work through what you need to work through, it helps you kind of get to where you need to be quicker. And then because it operates on your brain in a beneficial way, by kind of disrupting some of the negative patterns and helping to expand and create new healthy brain connections and brain patterns, that's where you get the sustainability. And that's where you start to see that these outcomes are lasting and these changes are sticking. And I'm always a proponent, and this is like really important to me when I'm talking about psychedelics. Psychedelics are not a panacea. They are not a cure-all. And, if anyone tells you that, I would just be careful. It's not. However, they are beautiful catalysts for transformation. That's how I look at them. But if you don't do the work after, if you just use the medicine and you do nothing after, you're not going to have the shifts that you want. You may have it for a brief period of time, but you're going to go back to your old ways. It's really about, and I really strongly believe this, that it is really about the integration and the work that you do after. And that's why the integration coupled with receiving the medicine is so important. But I think that, again, it really, these experiences can really empower people because it can show them what's possible. It helps to really kind of open their awareness again and open their perspective again. When you get depression or when you get anxiety, it can close your ability to kind of see outside of that bubble. I know that very well from anxiety. When I would come out of it, I saw things so much clearer and so much broader than I did when I was stuck in that little bubble of kind of like fear, worry, and doom. So I think the medicines help to show you, more of you. And then it's in that work afterwards to really help kind of like lock that in and really make those lasting habits or lasting changes and new habits.
So as I'm listening to you talk about the treatments, obviously in a clinic, right? That's a totally different experience and they're popping up all over the place. But if ketamine has been a it's been on the pharmaceutical, the approved, drug list for the various insurers, payers, et cetera, that as an employee you might be able to get. Before these clinics existed, how was somebody taking ketamine if they were, is it just kind of on their own? I'm not really sure. I've I've never been on an SSRI myself either, but is that kind of how it was categorized? Like, hey, we're going to give you a prescription for ketamine because you've proven that, you need it. What did that look like before, or even maybe even now, even though we do have clinics, right? But you may not be going to one.
Yeah, well, I mean, before, talking kind of going back,
Hmm.
ketamine wasn't really used for mental health at all. It was used as an anesthetic. So it was used for surgery, for operating procedures. So oftentimes it was used in pediatrics
Okay.
for surgery, and then also for other individuals. They actually, I think one of the first, or one of some of the initial ways it was the benefits of for mental health were discovered was because they were using it on the battlefield. And then it was helping the soldiers with their PTSD and with their depression. So that was some of kind of the initial awareness around its potential benefits for mental health. So then there was a ton of research, and the research started about 25 years ago or so around its efficacy and its safety for the treatment of mental health. And then some time ago, more recently, these clinics started to pop up, and they were able to create access, and still are able to create access by writing or prescribing ketamine in an off-label basis. So, doctors are able, so a pharma company will get a drug approved, and it's generally approved for like one or maybe two indications. But if there's enough clinical evidence out there and the doctor believes that it will be beneficial for other indications, they can legally write a prescription for that medication to treat another indication or another condition. And it's quite common. It happens, I think, 1 in every 5 medications, and it's also quite common in mental health space. So I think you hear quite often that there's a medication that was for one specific condition or even mental health condition, but it's written by the doctor for this other condition. So because it's medically necessary, they're able to write it off label.
Okay. So fast forward to today, right? And we now have, the ketamine clinics. We've got companies like yours that are, kind of connecting everyone together. Um, do you see this just, I mean, what's the future? Do you see this as a growing, kind of a growing business? Do you see anything changing? Are there certain, let's say, you've talked about unions a lot. Are there certain groups of people, companies, employers, and I kind of put on my benefits hat for a second, the public and labor, right? So that's probably where you've spent a lot of time. Um, where do you focus your efforts? How do we grow this and make it more part of traditional approaches to healthcare and mental health care?
Yeah, I think we know like mental health doesn't discriminate, but there are, of course, certain populations that have higher prevalences and maybe unique challenges to that industry that may make them have a greater need for something like this. So,
Mhm.
yeah, to your point, unions or construction, one of the challenges that they deal with is a really high addiction rate and also a really high suicide rate. So within construction, they have the highest average of, or they have the highest suicide rate, average suicide rate than any other industry. So,
Construction? Is that what you said? Oh, okay.
Hmm.
so it's 4.5 times higher than national average for construction, the suicide
Hmm.
rate, and that's
Four and a
five
half.
times greater than all other workplace fatalities combined. So their suicide rate is 5 times greater than all other workplace fatalities combined. When you think about that, they of course have a dire need to manage their mental health, and they're also, I think, at a state with them in building trades, unions. What that I think represents is that their individuals are often getting into a state of crises, right? When you have addiction, you have suicide challenges. Often that's because you're dealing with, there's kind of underlying PTSD, depression, anxiety, and underneath all of them are unresolved micro and macro traumas, or just kind of the pressure of everyday life, right? So there's the kind of root that sits underneath what they're dealing with. And what I think what we bring to the table is are these treatments that can help individuals get to the root cause, right? So they're not having to, rely on substances or alcohol to numb or to cope, or they're not getting to a state of crises, because we're helping them, at an earlier point of intervention. And I think some of the other challenges are they're of course highly male dominated, so they kind of blue collar tough it out mentality. They've got a higher prevalence of veterans, so right off the bat they have a higher prevalence of PTSD within their population. And they deal with different challenges. I mean, they have such important jobs, but they're so physically challenging on them. So they've got sleep challenges, pain. There's just so many things that they're up against. And I think while I think a lot of this industry has been trying to get them to be more open to talking about mental health and to, exploring therapy. I think what we find and hear is that, a lot of people don't want to take a medication every day. They don't want to feel like they have to rely on something, and they've kind of been taught to just tough it out. And they have a hard time maybe talking to someone, and maybe they don't want to go and sit with a therapist, every week. And sometimes I think it's hard to kind of get under the hood and kind of get under those defense mechanisms that we do a really good job of building up over the course of our lives. So that's why I think something like this could be really beneficial for some individuals, right? Because it can help to soften the ego or the defense mechanisms. It can help bring to light what needs to be talked to, or needs to be worked on. And then obviously you're doing so within the care of a therapist that's specially trained in these types of approaches. So that's just like one specific area, but there's lots of different reasons or why certain industries may be more inclined. But they, of course, I think have maybe a more imminent need, just because some of the, I guess, states of crises that some of their members are in.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I'm married to a painting contractor, so yeah, he fits the bill. I mean, not that he needs ketamine therapy, but just knowing the industry and knowing what he's up against, and I even thought about like, construction, you're very susceptible to injury, right?
Oh,
And if you get injured and and that's your livelihood on the line, that could lead you down a very, very quick path to depression and anxiety. And how am I going to make, this is all I know, right? That as I was listening to you talk, it felt so familiar. And even quite honestly, some of the things I've even worried about myself for my own husband, like what if he fell off a roof and he broke his back or something? Oh my gosh, how easy it would be to spiral.
well, I
So,
think about the safety aspect too. I think these construction companies, they spend so much money on safety, right? And they invest so much in safety. In my mind, mental health should be a top priority when you consider safety. Because when you think about
mhm,
if you're depressed or if you're anxious, like where's your mind? It's not present. It's not there focused on the job. It may be in another place, kind of trying to deal with or cope or worry, whatever it might be doing. But it obviously brings a lot of safety issues to
mhm,
the workplace, to the job site. So, in my mind, it absolutely has to be focused on. And, people ask me too, well, oh, ketamine assisted therapy, like how can they do ketamine when they're working? It's like they're not doing it when they're working. It's like
mhm.
it's a very kind of contained approach,
Controlled. Yeah.
controlled approach. Yeah, you have to go through a screening evaluation. You go into the office, you have your preparatory sessions first to make sure you're comfortable, ready. You're setting your intentions. You're going in for your medicine session that lasts about 40 minutes, and then it comes out of your system fairly quickly too. So it's
Mm,
not like if you receive a treatment, then you're not going to be able to work the next day. It's
mhm,
really only like active, where you're kind of really feeling the medicine, within a shorter window. It's the session itself is about 40 to 60 minutes. It may last a little bit longer after that. You're probably going to be like a little tired and woozy after. So you may want to like do it later so you can go home and sleep, or maybe take off the day that day.
mhm.
But it's not something that you can't do it and then go to work the next day, because it definitely gets out of your system.
So if I'm an employee and my employer has Anthea as this benefit, right? And I qualify for it, right? I've whatever done all the things and they said, yeah, this is what you need. So as part of what you all do there with the contracted network, and I think I read on your website over 700 clinics. that are in your network. So should be relatively accessible depending on where you live. Um, but hey, we have one here in Flagstaff. So, and we're considered a rural community. So if we have one, everyone
Yeah.
should have one.
Yes, and I think they're
But
in our network actually too.
yeah. Oh,
We're the last to get anything around here, so if we got one, everybody's got one.
yeah, exactly. We're still waiting for our Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
Hashtag Trader Joe's. Are you listening?
We just got our first In-N-Out burger,
Yeah,
so
we're
that's
very
where we're
excited.
at.
But ketamine clinics, really exciting. So as a person, I have this benefit. It's affordable, right? Because my employer is providing, probably paying for a large portion of it, maybe all of it, depending, because that's how benefit works, right? Employers will cover however much. And so then I go in and I've got 6 sessions, right? Did I hear that correctly? I think earlier,
Yeah, up to 3 prep sessions,
3 prep session.
up to 6 medicine sessions, and then up to 8 therapy integration sessions after.
6 medicine sessions, and then there's the psychotherapy part of it because you can't have just the medicine without the ongoing therapy, which is a lot of that is like the behavior change, right? Like kind of thinking differently, becoming a little bit more emotionally equipped to maybe talk about what you're going through. Is
Yeah, like pharmacologically, there are benefits from ketamine itself.
Mhm.
There are antidepressant effects, there are anti-anxiety effects. I think we, and many others just believe in that integration and that therapy being such a core component of it,
Mhm.
of those breakthroughs and making sure that it's sustainable and short term. Yeah, and to our network, we do have a nationwide network of credential providers. We individually credential every single one, just like a major carrier does. We actually use the same vendor that most of the major carriers do to credential those providers. So making sure they have the appropriate licensure, they're specialized, they're trained, background checks, all of that. And we have a pretty lengthy list, I would say waiting list of providers waiting to come into our network. But what we do is we wait until we have an employer that has employees in that area. And then when we have a need in that area, then we'll bring them on. So we can bring on new providers in any area across the country fairly quickly as part of that process. So yeah, they're just some of the ones that we have like ready to go, just based on the populations that we're serving today.
I love it. This is so cool. I have been learning so much about ketamine in the last couple of weeks, and meeting you and hearing everything that you know, which is obviously even way deeper than just this is what a ketamine clinic is, your own personal experience. Well, I'm excited because if we're talking about innovation here, and this is the Healthcare Uprising podcast after all. So I'm super thrilled that Anthea and providing access to ketamine therapy is part of that, part of the uprising. It's part of the revolution. Like let's get people better, right? Like we want to we want to be live happier, healthier lives, and this could be just exactly what somebody needs. And I can tell you too, just from talking with specific people who I know personally who have gone through ketamine therapy, I've certainly never heard anything bad about it. It's all been just good, raving. I wish I had this sooner, you know, and I wish more people had access to it to help them. So bravo to you guys for making this happen and bringing it to the world. So
Yeah, and as more of these medicines come online and they become legal and available, the hope is that we start to be able to pull them in as well. Psilocybin on a state by state basis,
mhm.
MDMA if it gets approved when they go through the approval process again. I mean, these just medicines they're just so incredible, and they're just such incredible healing modalities that I believe that we need, and
Mhm.
I believe will make, I would say pretty tremendous changes, I think, and ripple effect across the world if people really start to, I think be able to engage and have these breakthroughs.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just we're talking about it more, I think just
Great.
in and the more people that do it, the more advocates that you have out there, talking about it and normalizing it and saying, yeah, this is a legit way to treat mental health, depression, PTSD, etc. And my God, I mean, I think we probably all have PTSD collectively from going through COVID to some degree.
Yeah.
But I mean, not to make light of that, but there is it's it's becoming more and more front and center, mental health in general. And so I think ketamine therapy certainly has a place in there. And I'm glad that you're all bringing this to medicine, in a more open way. So
And I love
um,
that we're calling it medicine too, because I
it is
think
medicine.
it
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely, yes.
yeah. Um,
So, if there are employers out there who are interested in getting this as part of their benefits package, how do they contact you guys?
Yeah, great question. So our website is enthea.com. You can reach out to me directly. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to expand my network with new amazing people. And then you can reach me via email at jessica@enthea.com. And that's enthea.com. So pretty simple. And then our CEO is Sherry@enthea.com. So you can reach out to either of us. But we'd love to have chats and look, even if it's like, look, I don't know if I would ever be able to get this set up in my company, but I'd like to learn about it. We're happy to have the conversation. Like we really truly believe at this right now, like it's education and we know that it's going to take some time and we're more than willing to have the conversations and work together in partnership to see if, when, and how to make this happen and to, create that access.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we'll make sure we put all of your contact information in the show notes so that everyone that's listening can find you and connect and explore it. Right. So the first step is at least learning about it. So, and I hope that this episode and I hope that everything that you've shared today will help people open their mind, no pun intended, but open their mind to the idea of ketamine therapy for their employees, maybe themselves. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm hopeful that this conversation will help either them, their friends, their families, somebody
Yeah.
out there that may be struggling and may need a new way. So thank you so much. I'm really grateful for the platform to be able to share this information and the really great discussion and insightful questions. So thank you both.
Yeah, great. This
Thank you.
has been
Thank you.
amazing. Jessica Tracy, thank you so much. You've enlightened us today. So Jeremy, we've been enlightened.
I definitely learned some stuff. I now know what ketamine therapy is all about. I really wasn't
Yeah,
sure what that was doing for people. And
yeah,
I think you gave us a really good, clear picture of the tool that, and I think the main point to take away is the treatments give you the tool to help fix yourself, but you have to put in the work with the tool once you have it in order to make that fix happen. So I really appreciate that part of the conversation,
yeah.
actually.
And we're going to continue to dig into on ketamine. So we're doing a few different episodes on this. We're going to meet with an actual clinic provider, and a patient. So it'll be really interesting to kind of round out this whole story with your perspective and what you're all doing there at Enthea, and then all of our other folks that are going to be on the show. So I think we're going to have. I think everyone's going to be enlightened.
All right. Well, there you go, health heads. There's our conversation with Jessica Tracy from Enthea. That was a wonderful start to the uprising, I feel like. What a great interview. But what would you say our main takeaways from that are there, Heather?
I think the most important thing is just keep your mind and your heart open to all the possibilities in the treatment of mental health care, PTSD, and all the other related illnesses and conditions that it can treat. Ketamine's something that's worth much more attention, and it's growing and growing all the time, it seems. And you never know when you or someone you might benefit from it or your own employees.
There you go. There you go. And on that note, if you enjoyed what you heard or saw today, you can join us at Patreon at patreon.com/healthcareuprising. Become an official member of the Uprising for as little as $1 a month. Gets you early access to all our upcoming episodes. We do tend to record a good couple months ahead of time. So if you want to get ahead of the public release on this stuff and see all the upcoming things for as little as $1 a month, and from there it works its way up. If you join the higher tiers, you can get yourself a coffee mug, you can get yourself a T-shirt, things like that. But we're really looking forward to starting our community chats and whatnot in there as well. So that's really going to be the focus of our community area. Outside of that, you can also find us on all the major listening platforms, the Spotify's and Apple Podcasts and iHearts and things like that, as well as on YouTube. Just search Healthcare Uprising.
Awesome. And you can find us online at healthcareuprising.com and, of course, on social media, on all of the social medias, including LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. Just search Healthcare Uprising Podcast and you'll find us pretty easily. Also, if you have a story to tell, a new product or business we can learn about, or even just a question for one of us or one of our interviewees, just shoot us an email at healthcareuprising@gmail.com. So that's it for this dose of Healthcare Uprising. Until next time, keep looking for the good in the world. Sometimes it's where you least expect it.
This has been a Shut Up production.